Hey guys, Youngblood with you for the 60th episode of the Inbox. Starting with a question from Paradox Alpha saying, "Hey STL, I've been watching for a few months now and love the content. Thank you. Has there been any talk on personal scale small salvage ships? I know the Reclaimer, but is there any word on one for possible lone junker? And also, would you be able to store ship salvage in a normal cargo hold of a regular ship?" So there hasn't been anything, but I think that there is a demand for a ship like that. Now, to a certain extent, I think the Cutlass is going to have the ability to do what you're talking about, and in that, same sense, potentially something like the Constellation or the Freelancer. I think there's a lot of ships that can probably take on some level of salvage. The Caterpillar is another good example. Anything that opens up wide enough for you to actually get cargo into your cargo hold, and when I say cargo, I really mean the salvage, you're going to have a pretty good time actually conducting salvage. Now, the big difference here is when you start talking about the Reclaimer, you've got a processing center on board, not to mention the giant claw to bring stuff in, actually help to break it down. So you're not only doing collection of stuff, you're actually doing processing and rendering, so you're able to sell it easier and better, or use it for whatever you want it to when you actually get back and sell it. So I don't think you're necessarily going to see something that does exactly what the Reclaimer does, and it's probably based on size and scope. A good example would be comparing the Orion to the Prospector. The Orion is, probably a minimum 4-person craft. It's got the actual refinery on board. It's got the storage on board. It's got sorting. It's got a laser station. It's got a pilot. There's a lot more the Orion platform can do than the single-seat Prospector. Now, the Prospector has some things the Orion can't do as well. And when you start talking about that in the salvage scope, a smaller salvage ship would be able to get into areas that potentially a Reclaimer couldn't, but it's not going to have the same capabilities overall. So I'm not sure if we're ever going to see just a dedicated small salvage ship, but I think there's going to be ones that can actually take that on. And yes, you can put salvage inside of a normal cargo hold. Yort says, "Hi mate, I have a question. If I own a Polaris and I take it out with my friends, what happens to the ship and my friends if I log out, go to sleep? And another question, if my extra game packages have the option of engaging an NPC as part of this, what happens to these guys if they die? Because we have paid for them, do they have permadeath or will they be dead and we will need to hire pay for a new NPC?" Okay, so starting off with the Polaris question and what happens when you log out, that was actually answered in the kind of town hall session with Chris Roberts and his conies there, or cronies there. But they started talking about how you are going to essentially, if you disconnect and you have other real players on your ship, they're going to have to take over control of your ship. So in a Polaris, for example, if you've got somebody in a turret, they're going to have to haul ass out of the turret, run up to the bridge, and take over command of the ship. If you're just kind of by yourself and the rest is just kind of NPCs, if your ship's not in danger, it's gonna persist for just a very short while, and if nobody's around, it's gonna just kind of disappear until you log back on. So it's a little bit complicated, probably a little bit more gray. If you start talking about what happens when your friends are on, if you have an ISP outage and you're gone for an extended period of time, what happens? If your friends don't want to be flying your Polaris, are they going to have a way that they can get out of your Polaris and go do something else? I don't know the details on that, but we do know that you need to kind of be careful about who you have on your ship, because if you disconnect, they could technically take your ship. Now, as far as the NPCs are concerned, they're going to go through they're going to have permadeath. They're going to go through the death of a spaceman as well. Now, that being said, they're going to have next of kin too. Just like you, your main character, if it dies, it's going to be revived. If it dies, it's going to be revived. But if that happens too many times, or your damage is too severe, that character's gone, and you're going to have another one that replaces it. Your NPC is essentially just another version of your main character. So if that NPC, your kind of extra character slot, if it goes to a permadeath, it's going to have another one that ends up replacing it. So you're still going to have to kind of, treat them like a normal NPC, but it's not like you're going to lose it forever. That game package isn't going to be worthless if that character ends up experiencing a permadeath. Yoski says, "Here's a question. When will I be able to look at a target and have it tracked by the turret like an AH-64 Apache? And when night vision coming, space is dark?" I think what you're really talking about is going to be like head tracking, and that's something that we can do with Track IR, or at least we used to be able to do. The integration was something that apparently was accidental and has since been removed. They do have plans to actually bring that back so we can utilize it. Things like Oculus should be able to do this as well, and Vive. So when we start getting virtual reality and Track IR support, something like that will be back. Now, there is a workaround today where you can use some program and actually make it work, but I haven't bothered with it yet. But it is something that was working in the past, so it should be coming back at some point. As far as night vision goes, that's one thing I haven't heard anybody mention to this point, so I have no idea how to answer that. I think some of the spaces dark thing is kind of, I guess it's mitigated a little bit by the fact that you actually have, all these scanners and sensors on your ship. So you've got other ways to find them even in dark areas. Andrew LeBrun says, hey STL, I was wondering if we would ever see a ship cargo system for carrying small ships on the exterior of cargo ships like Starfarer modules so you can carry 2 Hornets instead of the cargo boxes and tanks. We haven't heard a lot about this. Now, we do know that with docking collars, if you end up docking to another ship, you're not able to actually like jump or fly. You're kind of locked down in space until they actually get removed. So you're not going to be able to necessarily just strap a ship to your docking collar and go. Now, we have heard that ships like the Hull series should be able to actually carry other ships on board, but you're not going to be able to deploy them. So, for example, if in a cargo container you've got a Merlin, you're not going to be able to scramble somebody to that Merlin and take off. Now, is there some sort of box that's coming at some point that can spring open and be a trap and then you can release a swarm? Maybe, but that hasn't really been mentioned at this point. So for like the Starfarer, for example, you may end up getting to a point to where you can carry another ship. Now, a Hornet is way bigger than a cargo box, though, but maybe you're able to do something like where you can stick it in a container and it actually eats up 2 of the docking spots or the cargo container spots. We'll have to kind of see, but there's been some mention, but as far as actually using it like these ships as a carrier, that's not really their purpose. But as far as just transporting a ship from point A to point B, there's probably going to be ways to do that. Spaghetti Milk says, question, what should I buy, the Cutlass or the Freelancer? I want something versatile, but not below $90 or more than $150. Frankly, those are probably your 2 best options in that price range. The Cutlass is going to be is going through a rework, and it should be pretty darn impressive when it's done. So if you want something that's a little bit more combat oriented, I would say go for the Cutlass. If you want something that's a little bit more exploration or cargo oriented, I would go for the Freelancer. The other things to consider, the Freelancer is probably going to be slightly more reliable, so you're probably going to have things break a little bit less, but the cost of ownership on a Cutlass should probably be a little bit less there too. So some of it's going to be just kind of the overall look and feel. Some of it's going to be what direction you want that versatile ship to lean. But frankly, I would just wait until you actually see the Cutlass. So what I would probably suggest at this point would be start with the Cutlass since it's $10 cheaper. And there's a possibility the Cutlass goes up in price with the rework. I don't think it will because it's flight ready today, but it's getting bigger, it's getting more beefy, it's getting better weapons. But that at least protects you. So then you can upgrade to the Freelancer later without having to spit out too much extra money. George Mears says, hey Youngblood, first of all, love the channel, thank you. My question is, will you be able to make a base on a planet or even a large meteor that you could store ships, guns, armor, cargo, etc.? If yes, do you think the bases will be custom made, wall by wall, or prefab? So we do know that there's going to be some sort of buildings that you can have. There's probably a couple different types. You can have hangars around where you should be able to store materials in your ships and things like that. But we also heard I don't think it was a 10 for the chairman, I think it was one of the town halls, about like a base in a cave. So I think there's going to be different options. We've also seen some artwork and concept work on prefabricated buildings that you can kind of drop. I think we'll probably get to a point to where you can do some like wall by wall construction, but I would say initially if they're going to open this up, it's probably going to be like the space type of cubes that you can drop on a planet, and I think that's what we're going to see. So the short answer is yes, you're going to be able to store things in probably a couple different types of places. I would doubt that you're able to actually do that on a meteor, but I don't really know. And our last 2 questions are patron questions, starting off with Sarah. Will ships always turn off when you get out of the captain's chair when I'm flying if the only one and happen to be in a multi-crew ship and the pirates start firing? I don't want my shields to turn off when I run to the turret. Depending on your ship, you'd be better off just flying and utilizing the weapons on board or trying to run, because if you get to your turret, you're probably just going to be flying in a straight line, which makes you an easy target, but that's beside the point. Getting out of the pilot seat is not always going to turn off your ship. You're going to be able to continue on. You're going to be able to get out of your seat. You're going to be able to, so for example, if you're in like a Freelancer DUR, if you want to get out of your seat while you're on a long cruise session, you can get out of the seat, go back, get a cup of coffee, and come back, or work on repairing something. Like, that's going to be available to you. I think what we have today is probably going to be replaced with Item System 2.0, which is going to do a lot towards, making the ships more capable overall. And the last question is from Clemorale. Where's the Avenger love? Haven't heard much about it since the flood of flight-ready ships over the last 6 months. You're right. You haven't, and some of that's because I haven't really been doing a picking the right type of ship video, so it hasn't necessarily come up a lot. For most of what we're doing, it's primarily surrounding, combat, and frankly, right now there's just better options in combat. The Saber, the Super Hornet, the Vanguard, the Gladius. There's just a lot that kind of outclass the Avenger where it's at today. For me personally, I don't like the Gatling-style guns in the game. I don't mind the Mantises as much, but for some reason, the Tiger Strikes on the Avenger and the Gladius, I just don't enjoy using. I have a hard time landing shots. I have a hard time with the spool up, and some of that may be desync. Some of it may just be my preferred flight style and how I kind of play the game. So for me, I'm not spending much time in the Avenger. I still like the ship. I think it's got a lot of value, especially at its price range. But for where we're at today and the type of content that's been coming, it's just kind of dictated not a lot of conversation about the Avenger. So that's it for this episode of The Inbox. Appreciate you guys watching. Get your questions in. Stay tuned for more, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.